All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. We have one more session, one more chance to be inspired, and I think you're going to find that you are this morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker, Ms. Ariella Brown, from right here in Dayton right now, but she's originally from Cleveland, as am I, so we're both Northeast Ohio kids. She has worked for Representative Marcia Fudge, now Secretary Marcia Fudge, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. That's when I first got to know Ariella, because she was a really adept community organizer and would get people together working on food system issues in the Northeast Ohio area and in Representative Fudge's area. She has a passion for doing that, for the kind of networking that we've been doing, the kind of service to people, and the kind of pulling people together. And you got a little bit of insight into that last night as Ariella talked about the Black Farming Conference on September 9th and 10th, which has registration that is free, so please be sure to do that. The 9th is my dad's birthday, so he's passed away, but I'm going to be there. So Ariella has also been organizing the Black Farming Conferences, works with Agraria in Yellow Springs, as you've seen. She's has a bachelor's from Baldwin-Wallace College in German, and also a master's in business administration from, no, the master's is from Baldwin-Wallace. The bachelor's in German is from Mount Union. I'll get it straight eventually. And she is now working just since April with the University of Dayton's Hall Hunger Initiative. So she also has a 14-month-old at home and a husband who's watching the little guy, so we should let her get going. Ariella, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can the audience, the online audience hear me also? So I am going to ask you all to be a little patient with me with this technology, because I am not great with it. But first, I do want to say good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Casey, for the invitation and for the warm welcome. I also want to thank Dr. Lowell for hosting us for the past day and a half. And for having us here at Central State University. I also want to thank Cheryl as well as Casey's entire team for really just putting on a really fantastic conference, especially after a 2-year hiatus. There's just something special about having an in-person presence during conferences, and just the power of networking is really important. And so I'm happy to be here with you all this morning, and I was really happy to be with most of you yesterday evening as well. So, oops, oh goodness, okay. So, as Casey mentioned, my name is Ariella Brown, and I use she, her pronouns, and I work for 2 dynamic organizations, the Agraria Center for Regenerative Practice in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which you all had the opportunity to visit yesterday, and the Hall Hunger Initiative at the University of Dayton. It was actually started by former Congressman and UN Ambassador Tony Hall in 2015. He actually served in Congress for over 20 years. And hunger has always been at the forefront of the work that he's done. He's actually very known for a hunger strike that he took in Congress, I believe in the 90s, and he actually didn't eat for nearly 30 days, I believe. And there were some high schools that nationwide did the same thing. And so I'm really fortunate to be able to work with 2 great organizations to really do what I'm very passionate about, is really helping growers and people that look like me. Okay, so there's a few things that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about community-supported agriculture. I'm going to talk about advocacy and why it matters. I'm going to talk a little about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it means to support BIPOC and underrepresented communities, and specifically highlighting, as you all are already aware, the Black Farming Conference and the BIPOC Farming Network. And then I'll just end it with some suggested readings as well. I am going to also read a poem that my colleague wrote for a prayer for Black farmers. Today's presentation will mainly be focused on my professional experiences, but I invite you to ask any questions or be a part of the conversation throughout my talk this morning. So this is going to be very casual. If at any point you do have a question while I am presenting, please feel free to just raise your hand, or if folks are in the chat virtually, please feel free to ask a question. We'll make sure to get that answered. Today we are situated in Wilberforce, Ohio, and I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Shawnee people. And I want to pay my respect to elders both past and present, and I also want to stop and acknowledge any elders and farmers that we may have in the room. So, we are here at Central State, a historically Black college and university, also an 1890 land grant, located in Greene County, Ohio, where the population is nearly 170,000. As was mentioned yesterday, there are no Black farmers that are accounted for in Greene County, but we know that. That Black farmers do exist. But the USDA census actually states that there are 817 farms in Greene County. So we know that there are some Black farmers, they just are not being accounted for. There are many reasons why underrepresented farmers in our region are not being accounted for, such as fear of retaliation, discrimination, and other reasons. So, let's talk about community-supported agriculture. I want to talk about community and what it means to support community-supported agriculture through an equity and advocacy lens. Most of us think of CSAs as joining our local community garden program and buying a member share of locally grown produce. But I want to talk about that first word in that phrase, community, because it means so much. When you think of community, you think of people, neighbors, local businesses, various industries, but if we're only supporting our individual communities that we feel most comfortable with, how can we grow and evolve? How can we unite and be better than we were yesterday? Community. We cannot talk about agriculture without talking about diversity. Although the industry is dominated by the majority population of Americans, agriculture is an industry that has been mastered by Black, Indigenous, and people of color for thousands of years. Dr. Annalisa Cox, the author of The Bone and the Sinew of the Land, America's Forgotten Black Pioneers, stated in her talk during our first Black Farming Conference of how well Black farmers farmed and cultivated the land in the West during pre-Civil War times. In her remarks, she stated that, quote, over 63,000 African Americans lived in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin before the Civil War. They were living primarily in rural regions, farming land they owned in over 330 African American farming communities. Scattered across those 5 states, there were 95 settlements in Ohio alone. According to Dr. Cox, from 1787 until 1838, more than 4 million settlers moved into this region. African Americans did farm the land well, she said. They came early, they picked out excellent land, and they succeeded. African Americans were living and farming in the Midwest before many white people arrived. African American farmers had to face incredible violence and racism from white neighbors and from some of the most powerful elite whites in their state because of their success. Prior to the Civil War, owning land, regardless of skin color, meant citizenship and the right to vote. Ohio, however, was one of the first states to take that voting right away as the statehood process began in the early 1800s. Quote, The whites who created the first Ohio Constitution put the word white in when it came to who could vote and who was considered a citizen. Stealing those rights from some of the earliest black citizens of the state, Cox said, those black farmers stayed and used their land and wealth to fight that injustice. These African American pioneers are an integral part of our American past, but their history has been buried for far too long. 1 in 7 employed Ohioans works in the agriculture sector. There are nearly, today, 80,000 farms in the state of Ohio, and according to the USDA, only 193 of those farms are black owned. So let's talk about why advocacy matters. But before we talk about it, I want to share a quick video on the Cleveland Seasonal High Tunnel project that I worked on during my time in Congress. So I'm just going to ask that you bear with me briefly while I get out of this. Oh, wrong video. No, this is right. Sorry. Yeah, this.
Increasing urban agriculture addresses several various goals and strategies. One is to reduce state land. Another is to create healthy food options for Cleveland residents.
You can take a vacant lot like this and have a community effort around food and nutritious foods. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Today, we're erecting seasonal high tunnels for Janelle and Monica.
The NRCS started providing incentive grants to urban farmers to build high tunnel hoop houses.
The equip program incentivizes historically underserved farmers, new and beginning farmers, to have these hoop houses and be able to grow year-round or close to it.
You know, for anyone that has a seasonal garden they're growing in an urban area.
They're able to then utilize their space for 4 seasons rather than just 1.5 seasons that we typically have here in Ohio.
It's going to allow us to take fruit and vegetables to market and have those options of those vegetables, fresh vegetables locally year round.
It becomes a revenue source for them, a revenue source for the community. And there's a health objective. The more fresh fruits and vegetables that can come into the diets of the families living in a neighborhood like this, the healthier those kids are going to be long term.
A big challenge is getting them up and getting them built. It takes a lot of personnel, a lot of tools, and some know-how.
They definitely take a good volunteer, and I call it a community effort, to get up and going.
What we've been trying to do is pick certain sites in different parts of the city to have this training built.
It allows people that volunteer and spend their weekend on the skill to take home their knowledge and replicate it in their neighborhoods and communities.
As a project partner with their food network, what we do is provide technical assistance. So everything from answering questions about building it, looking at the site, where do you orient it, where do you site it, how do you prep the soil, what to plant, where to plant, when to plant.
We work with people like Agraria, and that's known for putting up the high tunnels and knowing the excellence and just providing that skill set. Now another grade is monumental. This is the fruit, so to speak, of a significant collaboration.
Fair Food Network, we got the Ohio Extension Service, Southern Federation Cooperative, all these are people that are working with us to make this a great success.
It's public policy, it's nonprofit organizations, it's private individuals who are farming, everybody working together to make this happen.
I think that what we get out of what gets put in, the output for the investment is really quickly visualized, quickly seen, and quickly paid back.
It will produce the healthy food we need. But more than that, it's another energizer for the community to rally around.
Building community is really the first work, and that's really what's going on here. Building community with agriculture.
It's going to really allow me to really do something on a full-time basis, and I'm applying a passion to, just I love information, just planting seeds, seeing it sprout, and, harvesting it, and, having my kids, my wife, my family out here, and really seeing the impact it has on the community.
But I hope to see that children will understand where the food comes from, that they will be able to produce at home, they will understand the nutrition value of it, and that not only that, but our community will buy into the project and keep it going as we build the capacity for them to grow food.
Once you learn like this, never had everything.
So again, there's a little lag, so please be patient with me. So from local government to the federal agencies, advocacy and being civically engaged is critical to making the change that you want to see. One example that I like to highlight is my time working in Congress for former U.S. Representative Marcia Fudge, now HUD Secretary. Congresswoman Fudge had a vision to construct 100 seasonal high tunnels throughout her congressional district in Cleveland. She worked diligently with USDA's Natural Resource and Conservation Agency to implement a pilot program that brought federal dollars to a historically zoned urban district, which is really important. So I want to talk a little bit about this picture. So in the lower right-hand corner, you will see Mr. Avon Standard, who is actually the first recipient of the Cleveland Seasonal High Tunnel Project. He actually received a lot of publicity around being the first recipient of this project, but it was definitely a work in progress. It took a lot of sweat for us to get to the point for him to be the first recipient. Mr. Standard also actually is originally from the South. He migrated to Cleveland, and what he does in his particular high tunnel is he actually donates all of his produce to his church. And so he was just doing it really out of the goodness of his heart. In the left-hand corner, you will notice the gentleman from the video, Mr. Jamel Rakira, who is the owner and operator of Village Family Farms, and both of their operations are located in the city of Cleveland. So again, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of advocacy and more about the Cleveland Seasonal High Tunnel Project, and just talking about how it was a great idea, but it was definitely not fraught with its challenges. There were many, many challenges. And this is really where the power of local government and building relationships from the top down is important. A major part of the Congresswoman's congressional district is in the city of Cleveland, but it's not all of the city of Cleveland, but the majority of where we were trying to construct these high tunnels were in the city. They were having serious permit issues. One person would go in and they would get quoted for a permit for $20. Someone else would go into the city, they would get quoted $200. And so there was no consistency. And then depending on if it was in a specific area of the city, a council person might get involved and say, no, I don't want this high tunnel in my community. And so there were a lot of moving parts and moving pieces that we really had to make sure that we were just all in a line and had to bring all of our community partners together to essentially make this a success. In the video, you also may have noticed that there were many community partners that we really worked with to get this implemented. You know, the Congresswoman had a vision to support the community. She brought the federal dollars down, but we had to work with our community partners. So we worked with a nonprofit organization called Fair Food Network out of Michigan. They're, I believe, based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We also worked with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which is the largest Black Southern farming cooperative in the southern states, which is really important. And we worked with the Cleveland-Cuyahoga Food Policy Coalition, which I really do believe helped us a lot in being able to support a lot of these zoning issues and just city legislative issues that we needed support on. Some of our other partners included OSU Extension, specifically the Cuyahoga County Extension Office, and so again, we had to come together to make sure that this was going to be a success. This was not an overnight process, but with persistence and the realization of opportunity, we were really successful in achieving our goal. So the project began in 2012. The goal was to construct 100 high tunnels. We have various partners, again, from the federal level down to local. There were many challenges, such as zoning. Even the application process was also a huge barrier, because when you are applying for federal money, there's always a ton of red tape. And one of the issues that we were running into is we had a lot of individuals who were interested in the project and having a hoop house in their backyard or neighborhood community garden. But what was happening is anytime you owe any type of money to the federal government, they are going to get that money first before you even are awarded money. So for example, people would apply for a high tunnel, they would get awarded the money, but then they would look at their bank account and see that the money wasn't there because they didn't realize that they may have had some type of outstanding payment that they had to make to the federal government from any entity. And so one of the things that we had to do was we would host these, Adam Montre actually mentioned this in the video, is we would do weekend workshops, and we would not only talk about the challenges of the application process, but we would also work through, we would have one day where it was just about how to apply, what are some of the hurdles that you're going to go through, and really handhold people through the process. And the rest of the weekend will actually be spent on how to actually construct a high tunnel. And we would go to various sites around the city for folks who actually were ready to construct their high tunnel. So I want to challenge you all today to think about what you can do to leave a space better than you found it. So the new trending word is regenerative agriculture. You're hearing it everywhere. But really, it's essentially leaving the land better than you left it or found it. So how can we do this in our everyday lives? Community. It's about the power of community and not being afraid to work with your neighbor. Even if they do not look like you. Advocacy. What does advocacy look like to you? It may not be knocking on doors or phone banking or calling your local or federal representatives, but you can vote. That is your right as a citizen. What about helping your aging neighbor water their plants? Do what is within your own comfort level. And if we all remember to leave our community, our land, our neighborhood better than we found it, we will all benefit from these small but impactful acts of kindness. There are so many ways to get involved and support your community. You could join a CSA, support your local community garden, or donate. You can volunteer your local farmer's market or help a local farm with their harvest. Consider joining or even serving on a grant review committee. Finally, if you have a seat at the table, be a voice for the people who are historically underserved and bring their needs to the table as a form of change and allyship. So, how many of you are familiar with the Farm Bill? Of course, most of you in this room are. So, I'm sure that the majority, of course, of you are familiar with the Farm Bill and its significance to farmers and growers and how it impacts all of us from commodity prices to SNAP benefits. The first Farm Bill was enacted in 1933, and it's essentially an omnibus bill that is up for reauthorization every 5 years. The most recent Farm Bill was passed in 2018, and there are hearings and listening sessions currently happening all over the U.S. as legislators prepare to vote on the upcoming 2023 Farm Bill. During my time working for Ms. Fudge, we hosted a Farm Bill listening session at Hastings Dairy Farm, just outside of Cleveland, and technically it was outside of her district. But first, let me take a step back and just mention that Ms. Fudge was on the House Agriculture Committee, which had oversight of the bill, among other things. One of the questions that she actually got asked a lot was, why is a representative who represents a majority urban district on the House Agriculture Committee? But what most people don't realize is it has, again, oversight over the Farm Bill, and you can advocate for more funding because it has oversight over SNAP. And so one of the things that she was successful in doing is getting more dollars into the SNAP program. So we hosted a listening session. So during the reauthorization of the 2014 Farm Bill, we hosted a listening session where we actually brought urban and rural farmers together to testify in front of Ms. Fudge and other House members on relevant topics to them. One of the things that was actually most astonishing about the hearing was that the farmers, urban and rural, realized that they had more issues or things in common than differences. A few things that resulted out of that initial hearing was more funding for urban agriculture, and it also eased language in the 2014 Farm Bill for small and beginning farmers who wanted to take out small loans through the Farm Service Agency. Now, I realize that we're going into reauthorizing the 2023 Farm Bill, but I wanted to highlight this as another form of community-supported agriculture and just showing you the impact of advocacy that advocacy can have. And so in this picture, on the bottom right, this is actually at Hastings Dairy Farm where we had the Farm Bill listening session. And the folks here are the folks who testified in front of Ms. Fudge and other House members. And you can actually see, so we toured the dairy farm actually on a day that they were in operation. So there were cows back here. But it was clean, obviously, the day of the hearing. Anyway, in the top right-hand corner, that picture is actually the press conference that was held at Mr. Avon Standard's farm in Cleveland. And that on the left-hand side of Ms. Fudge is the former mayor of Cleveland. And then to his left is the former chief of the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is the agency that funded this initiative. In the middle, you'll see this is actually the largest urban farm in Cleveland. It's actually behind a HUD-owned property, and it overlooks the city. And so it's a really great picture. Most of the land is actually operated and cultivated by a refugee project. The picture in the corner left hand is Miss Fudge and Brenda Hastings, who owns the dairy farm. And then in the bottom left-hand corner is Miss Fudge during a committee hearing. And this was actually during a time where she had invited an urban farmer to actually come and testify in front of the House committee. So now I want to talk a little bit about, I want to move towards talking a little bit about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion and black farming. But before I do that, I want to play another short video. So this is a video from last year's conference, and our theme was Black Farming, Community Land, and Food Sovereignty.
Engage with us. Consider us being the hub, you as our stakeholders, and that we are here at Central State University assessing to help you. So what we did was write a couple 120 seeds each different machines. So the machine that did heat and light at the same time, so we had control. So we did soybean and corn.
So we took the drone pictures of each row, and basically each individual plot is an image is taken and cropped out of it, so it can be sent through an algorithm to sort of train a computer to recognize the phenotype of each different type of sweet potato.
Grain from hemp is phenomenal as far as its nutrient profile goes. It is one of the few plant proteins that has all of the essential amino acids. So a lot of people think of soy as kind of the only one that has all of the essential amino acids that humans need to be healthy. But hemp, in fact, has all of those as well.
Genetic variation that has been planted from throughout North America, South America, Central America, and some of the other countries where they grow a lot, they've been growing a lot of corn ever since Columbus. And it's corn is a rural plant. That was really Asia or Africa.
One of the ways to monitor soil health is monitoring soil carbon. And soil carbon through these best management practices is going to take some time. So I'm not going to see immediate results. So I'm setting up these plots for long-term monitoring of soil carbon.
And it's a closed loop system where the water just keeps filtering through the biofilters, the roots of the plants. Then by the time it gets down into the tank, it's clean it up, go back to the system. So all that, it just keeps running back and all the way on.
My name is Max Gustafson, and I'm the Center Season in Soil. It's a farm that I grew up on years ago, and it's actually a century. We farm about 450 acres. It's mixed up really about a third corn, a third soybeans, and a third.
Hold on one moment. Sorry about that.
And also a cattle and cow-calf operation that the majority of steers are a couple years ago, by necessity, I got into the material. It was something that one of the reasons we really want to so I'm excited
Yeah, we can close that.
pursue more aggressively.
There you go. Back to PowerPoint.
Thank you. Okay, so as I indicated, that video that I played was actually from last year's Black Farming Conference. We are going into our third year of planning. And again, as Casey mentioned, our conference will be held on September 9th and 10th. Registration is free and open to all. And so I want to talk a little bit about the importance of some of the work that I am doing supporting the Black Farming Network and the BIPOC Farming Network and how we really came to this point. So I started my work in Cleveland working for a member of Congress who was able to really support a lot of her constituents around food insecurity. And so I realized that was obviously a passion of mine. And so when I moved to the Dayton area, I was actually introduced to Susan Jennings, who you all here that are here in person got to meet yesterday evening. And again, she's the executive director of, well, it was formerly the Arthur Morgan Institute for Community Solutions. But now it's the Agraria Center for Regenerative Practice. And again, when I first met Susan, they were actually, I believe they hadn't even had their first meeting of, you know, the idea of starting a Black Farming Conference. And my colleague, Dr. Kevin Magruder, who is a history professor at Antioch College, you know, really talked about the importance of, you know, maybe doing a conference focused on specifically Black farmers and celebrating Black farmers, especially because there is such an influence here in Ohio and in the Southwest region as well, where we are. And so, so the logo, we actually worked with a friend of mine to come up with the logo to really try to represent Black culture. And my colleague, who's also on the planning committee, one day we were having a meeting and we were talking, and there was something very powerful that she said, and it kind of, you know, stuck with me. And she said, Africa is, our roots are Africa, our home is America. And, you know, that was something that I will always remember, and it's something that we have used in a lot of our marketing for our event. And so yesterday I had mentioned that eventually we may get to a point to where we have a conference that is specifically geared towards the BIPOC community, and then always having a separate conference for the Black farming community, because it is very much necessary and needed. Again, we need to celebrate all of our underrepresented farmers, because for too long we have not had that opportunity to be celebrated, knowing that a lot of the work that our underrepresented farmers have really cultivated a lot of the land, and were really at the forefront of the founding of this country. So in this picture is Ms. Tia Stewart, who you also met yesterday, who is really the director of a lot of the BIPOC initiatives, as well as overseeing the Regenerative Farmer Fellows Program. And a lot of the work that we're doing around BIPOC and underserved communities was born out of how successful the Black Farming Conference was. And so here in this picture is the second cohort of the Regenerative Farmer Fellows. And I believe Tia yesterday mentioned that there were 9 members in our second cohort. In the first pilot, there were 7. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the logo for the BIPOC Farming Network. So we do have a separate logo for the BIPOC Farming Network that is very similar to Agraria's logo. So we wanted to incorporate a lot of the different colors. And so just really quickly, brown is really representative of the BIPOC community. Green represents the land that we cultivate. Orange represents the sun that we need to survive and thrive. And circle is really the intersection of one another, representing us being a part of a larger community and being a part of a cyclical society evolving and changing every day. And it was really designed to align with the BIPOC Farming Network's Agraria Center for Regenerative Practice logo. I'm not going to talk that much more about the Black Farming Conference and the BIPOC Farming Network because most of you all were there yesterday, and Tia did a really exceptional job of really just going through a lot of the great work that we are doing. But feel free to also ask me questions. So we can do one of two things. You can either we can either have a little bit of fun and play Jeopardy, or we can just open it up to questions. Jeopardy. Okay, so let's see here. Hopefully, if I just click the link, it will go to the site. Okay, perfect. Okay. So I believe I went over most of the information, but you all will probably get these. So who wants to go first? Go ahead. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you. So while that loads up, does anyone have any questions or takeaways? Okay, who wants to go first? These are really just basic questions. Did I see a hand up somewhere? Oh, go ahead.
I'll do farm bill for 500 days.
Okay, who is the, and I apologize, this really isn't a farm bill question, but yeah, so who is the current agriculture secretary? U.S. agriculture secretary? Yes, that is right. Yeah, that's right. Oh, wait, let me see. I don't know why it's not showing. Okay, anyway, who wants to go next? You said 300? Oh. Okay. When does the 2018 Farm Bill expire? Yes, that's correct. Okay. Anyone else?
I have one I don't know the answer to that I'm curious.
Okay.
How many CSAs are there in the U.S.?
Okay. So it says data collected in 2015 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture indicates that 7,398 farms in the U.S. sold products directly to consumers through a community-supported agriculture arrangement. So it's not a straightforward answer. Yeah. How about 2 more volunteers and then we can wrap up.
The D&I for 500. I
Okay, so I'm actually, go ahead.
Or like every 6 months for the roundtable.
Okay, so I'm actually going to give that to you. So we actually aim to do quarterly e-newsletters and roundtable discussions. But we are actually going to be moving towards monthly e-newsletters. I like that. I like that. Thank you. Anyone else? I just need one more volunteer. Go ahead.
I have a question
Yes.
inspired off of one of the questions.
Yeah.
So, an advocacy for 300 about the major issues with the CSHD project. I mean, I wrote down some of the
Yeah.
issues, but like, how did you all go about kind of solving those besides workshops, like you were saying, the different pricing for different permits and then like zoning issues, all of that, like in a practical, I don't know, just like an example or a walkthrough.
Yeah, so, I mean, honestly, we would have conversations with our partners and meetings, and a lot of it, just to be 100% transparent, was political. So a few of my colleagues in the office knew someone who worked in the city and said, hey, you know, how are we going to make this happen? But then again, I do like to say that a lot of the success really did fall on because of the community partners, but then also the strength of the Cleveland Cuyahoga Food Policy Coalition. So I really do think that if you have a strong food policy coalition in your community, it does make a significant difference. And I can say that I have seen that personally working in Cleveland and now working here in Montgomery County. And politics can seem, or policy and working in government agencies and entities can seem like no one works together and you just want to like hit a wall. But if you have a strong food policy coalition, that can make a difference. And so we would meet with members of the Food Policy Coalition to say, hey, how can we get these zoning issues changed, or who do we need to talk to make this happen? So a lot of that did happen through the Food Policy Coalition. So working with the city and so the policy coalition was between city members and the county. And a lot of it came also from OSU Extension, the Cuyahoga County office. And again, for lack of better terminology, hand-holding. If there was someone who we knew wanted a high tunnel, we would really just walk them through the process and say, these are some of the issues that you're going to face. Here's how we can help you. And so we had to really stress that upon our federal agencies or federal organizations that we're working with to say, hey, if you are bringing this money into our community, you also have to spend the time to make sure that this is going to work. Go ahead. Yeah.
So when you're kind of forming those groups that want to pursue this initiative of like building a high tunnel in the community, how did you first kind of find a community member who was willing to like gather others that they knew and do the whole word of mouth thing? Like how did you find the first person?
Oh, I mean, because honestly, you know the people in your community. So a lot of my job, so I also need to say that I worked in my former boss's district office. So a lot of the work that I did was really on the ground. And so my colleagues in DC would say, Ariella, who do we need to talk to in the community? So a lot of my job was really to go out and meet all of the various growers, I could tell you who was doing what in what community. That was really my job, to be the face of the congresswoman in the district. And so if I wasn't doing that, I wasn't doing my job. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks for the talk, by the way. Appreciate it.
Of course.
It's good seeing you last night, too.
Yeah, likewise.
Understand everything that's going on.
Yeah.
For the high tunnel project?
Yeah.
Did you folks run into soil contamination issues, or you just pick sites that didn't have significant contamination issues?
No, so we definitely had those types of issues too. So a lot of the high tunnels were built with like just raised beds in them, but that was also part of the whole application process. Even NRCS would, help with like soil issues to make sure if someone was going out to specifically have a high tunnel on a certain site, that it was going to be successful. So that was all part of the process.
So in the city of Cleveland, is soil contamination in some of these lots that folks might want to use, is it fairly common? I don't know if you have a good pulse on how common it is. I don't know if these are like places where there used to be houses or.
Yeah. So there is an organization called RIDAL. You should definitely Google it. It's called the Urban Agriculture Innovation Zone, and basically 3 hometown friends took a historically dilapidated community or like land. They literally transformed a landfill where there were even, I'm not lying when I say this, dead bodies found in this area, and they converted it into a green oasis. And so now it's a complete like learning facility. And so again, it can be done. It just takes really a community effort. And actually, Central State is, so a lot of their aquaponics is really around the RIDAL model.
In the interest of making sure that nobody misses a plane and has to live in Columbus, Ohio for the rest of their life, we're going to go ahead and we have to wrap it up now, but I know you've got, I saw on your slides you have one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Or on your notes.
Oh, okay. So if you all don't mind, I don't know how many of you picked up one of these journals yesterday, but I really hope you did because it's remarkable. And again, Susan has been a really great person to just uplift a lot of the work that we're doing. And so my colleague, who is one of the original members of the planning committee with me, she is a poet and a community activist, and she actually wrote a poem, and it's called A Prayer for Black Farmers. And so if you don't mind, I did want to just end on that, and then we can wrap up. Let the winds be gentle and the sun be kind. Let the visceral memories of all you left behind guide you in your planting, affirm you in the dirt. Let Mother Africa caress you in this strange and bitter earth. A land that would not welcome you with open arms and peace, but treat you as an other, some foreign kind of beast. But you possess a wisdom from the cradle beginnings of man that sets your heart and mind and hands in harmony with the land. I salute you one and all, farmers big and farmers small, from rural plows and sacred sowers to backyard urban garden growers. From free men who came with hope to a new and foreign place, to freed men sworn to find a way of redemption for our race. Nothing can account for your perseverance and success, except that in your struggle you have been heaven blessed. Give nothing for your journey, cry not for your deep pain. No one will ever capture the depth of the refrain. The songs of freedom pouring from your precious soul as you water, weed, and harvest and labor in heat and cold. Making your contribution steeped in blood, your sacrifices stomped in mud, to feed a nation within a nation that would not have survived had you forsaken and not taken all the horrors they supplied. But you are the lifeline of the young, though your triumphal song will go unsung. The road you made will carry us through, and we give our thanks and honor to you. Cheryl Smith is a poet, activist, and member of the Agraria Board of Trustees. Thank you all.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ariella, for sharing that wisdom and inspiration to this group. Well, we're going to have a quick closing. We got started a little late, and I want to make sure that people are on time to get to their planes. So while I